Hello, my name is Andreu Ginestet. I'm a Catalan and a German artist, a silent diplomat, a scientist. I'm a member of the German Federation of Scientists, and I will propose today a contribution to your conference on peace and literacy, talking about the arts as a forum for utopia. The arts as a forum of utopia. Why? Because I understand that the arts provide with the necessary space and time to imagine a future that is close enough to be done, to be lived through, but which doesn't exist yet. And we will do so by exploring how this has been done in the past, looking, for example, at art history and how art history provided for utopian moments in the past. And we will do so discussing the contribution of a Flemish painter, Peter Paul Rubens, of the 17th century. He was born in 1577 and died in 1640. And Peter Paul Rubens was not just a painter, he was also, like I am, a silent diplomat. He worked mainly for the Spanish court, for Philip IV, and I will discuss one of his paintings, which is War and Peace, and discuss how this painting was used in terms of silent diplomacy to provide for a real peace, which is then a utopia. Why? Because it is a future. Peace is a future. It's a promise of non-war. It's a promise of living time. It's a promise of thousands of men who are not going to be killed in a battle. Yeah. So it's a promise for future. Utopia is always something coming from the future, something that we seek, that we hope to achieve. And in this case, the painting War and Peace must be understood like, from Rimini, when the Malestata court once dreamed its own renaissance of utopias. And we must ask ourselves if the arts nowadays can provide with still the same momentum as Rubens did in the past. Yes, so starting from that point where you are in Rimini and seeing what happened in Rimini in those times, we can approve and say, yes, Rubens managed that in 1629 and 1630 along a mission he had from the Spanish king and from Spanish aristocracy. He was sent to Charles I as a mediator with some powers. And what he did is that he painted this painting, War and Peace, in which we see several allegories like Minerva protecting peace from Mars. Mars is looking behind his shoulder, seeing, can I grab peace, can I get at her? And Minerva is putting a shield in between and getting him out. And we see in the painting then pomegranate, which is the symbol of Spain, so it's all an allegoric painting. But it's a very seducing painting, and Charles I happens to be an art collector, an enthusiast of the arts. So Rubens providing the painting was a way to make sure that Charles I would listen to his advice, to what he had to say. And Rubens did the painting under stress. You must imagine that the court at the time was opposed against a peace, a truce between Spain and England. The aristocrats in Great Britain were against any attempted peace. And when Rubens managed to have a conversation in which Charles I would promise a peace, he would then go out of the room and he would then listen to the aristocrats talking among themselves and listen how they would plot against that peace treaty that he himself negotiating. And then he had to go back into the room, and he did so with Sir Balthasar Gerbier and other people, and asked the king to repeat his promise. And the king repeated the promise, and this is how a peace agreement came about in 1630, which was then confirmed and signed in Madrid. It was the Treaty of Madrid. This is important because here we see how a painter who is under stress, he's put under pressure, negotiates and manages to overcome the hatred and the, let's say, enmity of the aristocracy of the court. A silent diplomat, an artist silent diplomat today does exactly the same. You can imagine that when I am within NATO, for example, and I am in the room and I'm sitting there, all the CEOs of the arms manufacturing companies are with me in the room, and they are not friendly to what I have to propose. So it's exactly the same situation that repeats. So yes, we can say the arts offer space and they offer time for an ongoing process which is providing utopia and providing future. So we may wonder how this comes. How is it that you witness a silent diplomat talking to you? What a ridiculous issue. Well, it happens to be that we live in a great free ride. It's my second slide. Peace is externalized by capitalism, which implies that the cost of peace is provided by single actors. In the 17th century, it was Peter Paul Rubens, who, by the way, then maybe got some commissions by Charles I, the Medici family, Philip IV. So it's not like he would be starving. My situation is different. But he had to provide with the sources for mediation, which was that he had to provide with his own art as capital, as social capital and as cultural capital for the peace process. Capitalism does this ongoingly, so I am providing with exactly the same for the peace process nowadays, which is something which shouldn't be. So we have a common good, which is peace, and capitalism avoids paying for it. It's the cost is externalized on individuals. One of them, for example, was Johann Galtung. Johann Galtung is a perfect example of a single actor. It's the founder of several peace research institutes, among them CIPRI. He founded or co-founded then also Transcend University, the Peace University, and Galtung managed a lot of conflicts. I met Galtung personally. I had the opportunity to meet him in Spain, in Alicante, at his home, where he received me barefoot on the street. He was waiting for my wife and me to arrive, and he did so barefoot and explained why he was barefoot. He was barefoot because he needed to connect himself to earth, to ground himself. Why? Because his existence has been very volatile. He's been betrayed by Western institutions, by, let's say, the advocates of human rights, in several ways. I'm gonna just tell one example. In our visit in Alicante, he explained to us how, for example, the peace mediation in Afghanistan went previous to 2001, previous to the 9/11 event. It happens to be that Johann Galtung was on a peace mission in Kabul in the Loya Jirga. He was directing the Loya Jirga, which is the assembly of the Taliban, towards peace. And he did so for months. And he did so successfully. And then suddenly, in the summer of 2001, the Taliban went in and disrupted the process, stating that there would be war, that they knew that an American attack was imminent, and Galtung had to leave. Johann Galtung didn't say that 9/11 was provoked, so a false flag attack by the Americans, but one may interpret his statements this way. And the point is that he felt extremely betrayed because he was achieving peace and then suddenly his efforts are put to waste. I would like to remind you that in the case of Iran and the talks that were held in Geneva just a few weeks ago, we have a very similar situation. And how the situation is, well, we can maybe project what happened now a few weeks ago with Iran to Afghanistan in 2001. Okay, so the first thing that capitalism does is it externalizes the cost of peace on individuals. Then it does it also, for example, pretending peace by having nice institutions like the ICIP, Institut Català Internacional per la Pau, the International Peace Institute of the Catalan government of the Generalitat de Catalunya in Barcelona, which is a very nice institution. I love the people doing the work, but they are very few. They have no real power. They don't have budgets. They don't have rooms. They don't have personnel. It's a forum. We can discuss peace there, and this is very nice. We have peace on the government level, but we can just discuss peace. We cannot do peace. What is it that we need instead as to not to externalize the cost of peace in capitalism? We need institutions, strong institutions like the ACA. The ACA is the Catalan Agency of Water. It provides drinking water to all citizens, and it overrides and rules over budgets and hundreds of employees that provide the population with water. So in fact, what we need is a strong institution, or the institutionalization of peace through budgets and personnel and capabilities. This is a necessary shift. And why is it necessary? Because we don't want to talk about ideologies like communism, which promise peace but articulate on power. We want to provide utopia, which is a close enough reality which then allows for future, which avoids war, so avoids the killing of thousands of human lives, which implies that there is going to be life, literally, because war is the opposite of life. So war is the negation of life, and the utopian element of the future utopia is that life is allowed to thrive, which implies that we, don't rely on ideologies, on promises, on labels, but we rely on realities like the ACA. How do I project this kind of transformation, of social transformation? My proposal is that we engage with courage in a theater play. I see theater as a birthplace of a new reality. My title is Pareto for Peace. I am based on Vilfredo Pareto, the Italian mathematician, who understood that the Pareto relationship of 80-20 is a stable relationship in several natural settings. So, for example, behaviors within populations, populations within a natural environment, 80-20 relationships also within physics. We have several occasions where we see that 80-20 proportions are stable proportions. And right now, my idea is that we have a Pareto relationship between trauma, violence, and empathy and cooperation, which is 80% right now is in favor of trauma and violence, and 20% in favor of cooperation and empathy. My idea is that we reverse the Pareto. Yeah, so we shift, and we have then 80% for empathy and cooperation and 20% of violence. It's a game. I understand the laws discovered by Vilfredo Pareto as a game, and in this game positions can be shifted, and the theater of Pareto for Peace is thought as a theater according to Augusto Boal's theater of the oppressed, which is a theater method that allows for the participation of the general public. And the spine, the core element of my play is an emotional strategy. The emotional strategy is based on 7 emotions, which are healthy and which are logical. So it's like the first emotion is curiosity. Why? Because in order to be alive, to feel alive, we need to be open to the world. So curiosity is the basic entry point also in the stage. Then the second is astonishment, which is when we make discoveries and our attention is focused on something. then the courage, because once our attention is focused and we have an idea maybe, and we want to do that idea, we need to change reality. And for that, we need a lot of courage. And the next emotion is then maturity. Maturity is articulated through 80% humility and 20% pride. 80% humility, why? Because if we want something to be changed, we need to put a lot of effort, precisely under stress, into it, like Rubens did with his painting in his time in the court in London. So then we may have something that is achieved, that is finished, and because it's achieved and a lot of time and effort went into it, we love it and we communicate that with love. So we have the fifth emotion, which is love. Love as a source for communication, as the most pure and the nicest form of communication, love. And when we love something and we communicate, we share our love. And we know that when love is shared, it's the only thing that multiplies and is not divided. And this results then in happiness, the sixth emotion. But it's an emotion which is grounded, which is based on the previous experience and the transformation. So it's a real happiness. It's not a fake ha 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 ha. I just have spent 10,000 euro on a Louis Vuitton bag. And finally, the seventh emotion is emancipation. It's because when we have felt this and experienced the happiness with other people, when we have shared a moment of love with other people, then we can say that the process is finished and we are worryless. We don't have worries. We don't have to worry about the future. We have learned a healthy emotional chain, and we know that we can repeat this emotional chain and restart from zero. The alternative to this would be, for example, the notions derived from Alfred Fleissner, who published in 2025 an essay. He died in 2025, and Alfred Fleissner published an essay in which we must accept that thermodynamics and history combine to ending civilization as we know it in a nuclear war, and obviously then in the decay of complex structures. Well, my call is to use Pareto for peace before we have to collect the fragments, as with Ernst Bloch, 1917, Geist der Utopie, where Ernst Bloch discovers that fragments are the units of culture. So I hope we manage to reorganize the fragments before we have a nuclear explosion and are fragmented in nuclear terms. My fourth slide is dedicated to understanding that Pareto for peace could be something like a new standard. The Pareto zero point of departure. It implies that we use Pareto for peace as a play with a lot of patience and humility. It's a very complex vision. The play itself lasts 3.5 to 4 hours minimum, which implies that the people participating, the public, the general public, will need a lot of patience and humility to go through it. And maybe they don't manage to do it at one go. Maybe they have to go out and come back in another day. Yeah? But Pareto for peace is thought, according to Augusto Boal's method, as an interactive exercise for the audience, which is also the moment where now you can, for example, ask yourself a question and write this question down. I'm going to pause for 5 seconds. Okay, I have, for example, for you a question for myself, which is, well, how do you want to manage, Pareto for peace talks about 41,000 complexity observatories. How are you going to manage that without bureaucracy? Well, the answer is very simple. The method of Pareto for peace describes how, for example, the complexity observatories work. And they work with an educational seminar. The seminar lasts 32 hours. And the idea is that the personnel is changed after 3 generations. So after 3 times 32 hours in all of the complexity observatories, implying that the entire human population has access to that knowledge, and that the entire human population of planet Earth gets that badge of education, and that knowing to handle those 7 emotions will be something like riding a bicycle for everybody on planet Earth. You know, everybody can imagine people riding bicycles on planet Earth, right? So you know that finding the balance is something you learn once, and once you can do it for your entire life. You don't forget about it. Well, riding those 7 emotions is learned in that 32-hour seminar, and the first generation of workers within the complexity observatories educates the second generation, the second generation educates the third generation, and while these 3 generations are educated, the first is still in with the third, and then it moves down. So the second then, you know, becomes the first, the third becomes the first, and, you know, there is a permanent change and shift of people working in the observatories. Why? Because the data collection is quite boring. There is going to be instruments which are going to help doing the evaluation, so computers will work, allowing people to rely on their emotional life stronger than on any mathematical ability, and allowing people to feel a new type of security which is based and grounded on emotional sequences. So if we manage then to revert the proportion of trauma and empathy towards in favor of empathy, we, for example, then can renounce, we don't need anymore the concept of property. Why? Because we have learned to deal with reality in terms of responsibility. So property becomes a responsibility, one more responsibility, and we simply don't own the property, and we don't have to pass it on to the next generation. We just own it for a moment. It's limited in time and scope. You know, there is a lot of shifts that can happen. And this we do all with tools which I have, you know, initiated. I have started working on mathematics, providing with, for example, a vitality index and a complexity cube, which are documents you will find in the annex. Slide 5, we shift from trauma to empathy in the in vivo laboratory. We now have this theater of the oppressed. We don't have a goal which is to achieve peace as a status quo, but instead we achieve the experience of a real-time social change within the stage, within the theater play. And this allows us not to seek a goal and to run after that goal, but to live through a process that is safe. And the safety we experience then becomes the new standard. So we have a Pareto of emotion, and we shift the balance from trauma to empathy, which is then the utopian element, which is the future, which is the lives of these thousands of people who are not going to be killed, for example, and will be able to thrive. And the rule is that on the stage we're allowed to say nonsense, we commit errors, and then we have the general public with us, which helps and corrects the error. So we we learn to accept that nothing is perfect, that it's a process, that error is a method, and we forget the target. The doing is the utopia. What does it mean? It means that Pareto is not a final strategy. It's not a recipe. It's a tool for in vivo social transformation. And what does this mean? It means that we don't follow a political program. We don't follow promises. We do them. We practice them in the theater. And once we get used to that practice, what do we need the promises for anymore? So my proposal is that we follow a protocol, that we set a new standard, that the new standard is a complex product like Pareto for Peace, and that anything below that standard is simply seen as a satirical product, a satirical comment on the past. And Pareto for Peace is just a play. It's not, it's, you know, a play that we execute on the stage for the Boal stage, the Augusto Boal stage, with a scenery and with stage directions, nothing more. Everything else then is derived from citizenship. So political decisions emerge from that assembly. So finally, I think that we must take the responsibility to leave our children a planet free of nuclear war. That's the task. The process is that you know, citizens never stop playing. So once they learn the process of Pareto for Peace on the stage in the Augusto Boal setting, they take that home and they apply it wherever they are, in their business, in their daily lives, in school, in the relationship with the administration, etc. You know, I think that Pareto for Peace provides for enough intelligent answers for options, but these options don't need to be done, because the general public will know, it will be wise enough to decide what needs to be done at the time. There is some urgency in doing so and ending then, for example, outdated concepts like property, which is something you may want to discuss, but it's my proposal. And it's urgent to do so because if we look at, for example, the documents provided by Andreas Reckwitz, see please the annex, you will see that Andreas Reckwitz states clearly that dystopia is taking over utopia. So we have narratives that are dystopian, that are distorting the promises of the future. And I think we need to do so also in a form of gender parity. You know, I had an exhibition in Ripoll in Catalonia, and this exhibition was set on the, you know, the opening was set on the 8th of March, the Day of Women on Earth, because my sculpture talks about the even relationship between genders, because we are interdependent. We exist as species because men and women reproduce the species, so they are equal. They're interdependent. There is no winner in this relationship. And the interesting thing is that, for example, in the utopian discourse, we have Charlotte Perkins Gilman, 1913, a book that was published with the title Herland. And in 1913, Charlotte Perkins Gilman invites us to imagine a planet where men land, astronauts, and there they meet the people living on that planet, and it's only women. And they reproduce themselves by hermaphroditism. Well, you know, there are huge conflicts that are established between the arriving men and those women. In the end, the men must leave the planet. And the question really is, do we want to go to that extreme, or are men, the men listening to me right now, for example, going to be able to rethink their own relationship with themselves and with the women in the room, to the point where we will have a healthy relationship between the genders? I see that as the basic and the ground departure point within Pareto for Peace and within all of my writing. So with Charlotte Perkins Gilman, I wish to end my presentation. Thank you very much.